So good afternoon to all of you. My name is Sarah Bordelot, and I'm an Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement in our Alumni Engagement Office. On behalf of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement and the Women's Leadership Council, I'd like to welcome you to our second installment of our new Women in Leadership Speaker Series. The goal of this series is to bring attention to the many successful alumni of the University of Rhode Island and corporate leaders by highlighting their career paths, providing inspiration, and sharing their knowledge and experiences with students and alumni. I'd like to note that this program is being recorded for future viewing. Additionally, we will be taking Q&A, audience Q&A at the end of the program. If you have any questions for our speaker, you can type it into the Q&A feature that you see on your screen at any time during the program. Please note that we may not be able to get to all questions today. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a special thank you to the President of the University of Rhode Island, David Dooley, for attending today's webinar, along with the President of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement, Lil O'Rourke, as well as Vice President of Alumni Engagement, Michelle Nada. Many thanks for your support of this program and for joining us today. I'd also like to highlight the Women's Leadership Council. Led by a group of volunteer alumni, this council seeks to develop opportunities for all URI women by offering programs for alumni to interact with and act as role models for students and for one another. Additionally, the Women's Leadership Council supports and promotes the Women Transforming Women Endowed Scholarship, a scholarship that is awarded each year to a woman-identified student who holds a leadership position and maintains a GPA of at least 3.0. Within a few days of this program, we will send out the webinar recording as well as a link to give to this important scholarship. Now, I'd like to introduce our host, Theresa Brown, who will graduate next May. Theresa is a triple major studying journalism, writing and rhetoric, and Italian, and has a minor in women's studies. She has been published in several magazines and newspapers, including Rhode Island Monthly, Etherbound, the Warwick Beacon, and the Cranston Herald. Additionally, she's the editor-in-chief of the University of Rhode Island's Good 5-Cent Cigar, and recently contributed to the kickoff program for the $250 million campaign for the University of Rhode Island. She is applying to Master of Arts publishing programs and aspires to be an editor for a book publishing company in New York City. Theresa is hosting from the recently renovated and beautiful Broadcast Center and TV production studio on campus in Chaffee Hall. We are so lucky to have Theresa Brown as a student at URI and also as our host today. Welcome, Theresa.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today with Dean Bontempi. As I've gotten to know her a little bit more leading up to this program, I think there is so much that we can learn from her. So it is so exciting to get to introduce her today. She is the new Dean of our Graduate School of Oceanography, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Dean Bontempi joined the URI community as the Graduate School of Oceanography Dean this past August. As Dean, she is responsible for providing leadership and oversight for the graduate school and the Narragansett Bay campus's academic research and outreach activities. Dean Bontempi brings more than 25 years of experience at NASA, where she most recently served as the acting and deputy director of the Earth Science Division, Science Mission Directorate of NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. In that role, she provided leadership and strategic direction and overall management of the agency's entire Earth science portfolio and includes technology development and mission implementation. Additionally, Dean Bontempi was responsible for allocating resources and leading a division of approximately 75 scientists, engineers, and administrative professionals, as well as developing policies and priorities for numerous programs and coordinating with the scientific applications communities throughout NASA, federal advisory committees, and more. Prior to NASA, she was an assistant professor of oceanography at the University of Southern Mississippi's Department of Marine Sciences. Dean Bontempi received her Ph.D. from URI's Graduate School of Oceanography back in 2001, received her Master of Science degree in Oceanography from Texas A&M University, and her Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from Boston College. I'd like to thank Dean Bontempi for joining us today for this wonderful conversation. There is so much more to learn from you, so we're just going to dive straight into the questions.
Thanks, Theresa.
Dean Bontempi, as a GSO alumna, You were already familiar with the school's scenic Narragansett Bay campus and outstanding reputation as a leader in ocean exploration and research. What were some other factors in your decision to lead GSO?
It's a great question. It was a tough decision, leaving a place like NASA. It's a place filled with really brilliant scientists that empty the tank every day. They're dedicated to their craft and their field. And I thought a lot about where I was in life. I have a young son. We had been in Washington almost 2 decades. And I thought a lot about GSO, which was a place that was incredibly formative for me, not just as a scientist, but as a student. And so I admittedly agonized over the decision for quite a while. And I have an older sister I was chatting with. And, I was telling her, here are my pros, here are my cons, right? And she said, I've heard you say a number of times that when you started at NASA, you were one of 2 women. And then, that number grew over time. And she said, you've mentioned how you'd like to give back and help a number of times and like help other women and work on diversity and influence that in STEM in general. She said, why would you wait until you're retired to do that from the federal government? Why wouldn't you do it now while you're still young? Or at least I consider myself still reasonably young. And so, that was the moment, that I was like, she's right. And that day is the day I signed the letter and sent it back to the provost and said, I'm really excited about this and I accept. So getting the opportunity to work with a school, a faculty, students and staff body, a campus, and a university that was so formative for me, I feel like it's the least I can do to give back to something that meant a lot to me in the past.
Well, we are so excited to have you with us at the URI community. So after being on the Bay campus for about 2 months, what are your initial impressions of teaching, research, engagement of students and faculty, just overall as we kind of navigate the new norm of being in a pandemic?
Yeah, no, it's really funny. I can't tell you how many people, myself included, are ready to put 2020 to bed. And it's not like we have anything else coming up in the year that's important, right, for the country or otherwise. I have appreciated that in like a COVID pandemic world, people have taken the opportunity to come by my office at, of course, a safe distance with masks and sit down and share some thoughts, one-on-one. I've done lots of Zoom calls with faculty, students, and staff so far, which I'm really excited about to hear people's thoughts. People are excited, they're energized, like even though we're in a pandemic, they're ready to start thinking about where they want to be in the next, year, 5 years, 10 years. And I'm really excited about that too. It's a good point in our history. It's a good inflection point, right? We have a new facilities plan. We have a new master plan. We have a new ship coming online in a couple of years. And it's just a really exciting time to look at the future.
I think what's great about URI is that everybody really encompasses our big ideas, bold plans slogan for sure. I mean, everybody is always just so motivated and so about change here. So with that, what new initiatives are you excited about for GSO?
Oh, great question. So I've been making the rounds with the other deans at some of the other schools, and we've been having talks about what goes on in other colleges, what they're thinking about for the future, what I'm thinking about with GSO, and more importantly, for me, it's not just what I'm thinking about for GSO, but it's what GSO is thinking about for GSO, right? And everybody on the Bay campus. I mean, we're lucky enough to have ocean engineering here with us, the Coastal Institute, and so many other affiliate institutions with EPA and NOAA across the street. But I've slowly started to meet with these people and say, I have a couple of ideas that I'd like to pursue in the coming year, but what's going to be most important is sitting down with the GSO faculty, students, and staff and really doing some strategic planning. I'd like to hear from them where they think the major scientific hurdles are, or challenges or opportunities in the coming years, and lay out a plan to go there. I think some of the ones that are pretty obvious is global climate change, really climate variability and change, and the impact not only to our global ecosystem and home planet, but also to our Narragansett Bay and some of the resources that are there. And so I really look forward to doing everything we can to connect ocean exploration with economics, which I think would be really unique on this campus.
And with that, how do you think we can continue to elevate GSO's profile as a premier oceanographic institution? What would you describe as your leadership style?
Okay, so, my leadership style is I manage with a very long leash. I like to set up my meetings and the dynamic on campus so people feel empowered to implement things and ideas and initiatives that they've come up with. I sort of have this rule that before we have a meeting to make any decisions, that all the read ahead is due 48 hours in advance, so everybody can come into the meeting prepared, and then the person whose idea it is that they're bringing forward feels empowered to go off and do that, right? That's kind of how I like to do business, and I don't check in with people or expect them to check in with me unless, there's a regular report or there's a challenge coming up or something like that. So I think situating the campus in that capacity enables people who are self-starters and who have new ideas and who want to integrate with different factions on campus. They'll have the ability to do that. So I'm excited to push that forward with some of the GSO faculty, students and staff who have already brought lots of ideas into me, and we've started to work together to figure out next steps for some of those ideas. And some of those include increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus. Some are whole new ideas and focal points in research. So it's an exciting time.
And you have quite a unique story and passion for your field of study. So when did you first get interested in your field? What led you here?
Yeah, well, the story goes from my parents that I was 5 years old and we were in our basement watching TV, and I told my parents I wanted to be an oceanographer. And I remember my dad smiling really big and my mom being really upset. And I actually didn't really understand why that was until I was like 30. But come to find out that a lot of my father's family were commercial fishermen in Italy, and many of them were lost at sea. And I think my mom sort of wanted us to have careers, I'm the youngest of three, that were quite different from that. She wanted us to have an opportunity where we didn't put ourselves at risk physically like that, which is why I went to work for NASA, right? But anyway, yeah, so I knew very young that that's what I wanted to do, and surprisingly stayed with it through now.
And so you've succeeded in a field that continues to struggle to attract women. It's estimated that less than 30% of the world's researchers are women. What are some of the barriers that deter women from pursuing these careers in science? And how can we overcome those? Why is it important that women continue to fight to be in the STEM fields?
Yeah, it's a good question. I heard a seminar last week where Marcia McNutt, the president of the National Academy of Sciences, gave a commentary. Somebody asked her, the impact of something like COVID on families and on women in STEM. And, she was like, she gave this answer, and I don't want to put words in her mouth. She answered a lot more eloquently than I will, but the idea that STEM has forced people to be at home, there are some good things that come out of that and some negative things, right? And it seems that from what I've heard from a lot of my professional colleagues, the women feel like they've traded a lot more or have been quantified to have traded a lot more in their careers than a lot of men. And I don't understand the drivers of that, and I haven't done my homework there. The same could be said for, I think, a lot of women in STEM. When I got to NASA, there was one other woman in earth science. And she had been there a long time and very clearly had come up through the ranks of being tested again and again and again and stayed in there. And she didn't have a family, I remember that. And I was young, my age, I was about 25 years younger than the median age at the agency at that time. And I was an anomaly, and my boss completely took a chance on me, and they put me through the ringer. There were a lot of tests. There was a lot of proving yourself. It was a stressful environment, and I don't think it was for everyone, but I think the converse to that is why I'm here, right? why I decided to take this position early on, why I think we need to focus on helping other women in STEM. And it's not just about recruitment, it's about retention. It's about creating the environment at GSO and across the URI campus that allows people the personal lives that they want and the professional lives that they want. And that kind of systemic change doesn't happen overnight, right? It has to be absolutely inherent in the planning that GSO as a campus is going to do come the January timeframe. And the same goes for diversity, right? That can't just be a chapter as an afterthought and, oh yeah, we want to attract women. It's more about like, oh yeah, you know, we have to make this absolutely inherent in our planning and set up a situation where we can actually encourage and retain those people. That requires mentorship, support, and lots of other things.
So with that, do mentors and role models like you play an important role in reducing this gender gap?
You know, I said to someone recently, just because I've gone through it doesn't mean I'm qualified to be a mentor, right? That takes a really special person and special training. I don't know the answer to that. I think every step of the journey is going to be one step at a time. And I think becoming a mentor means more than just like, okay, yes, Theresa, I'll be your mentor. We'll meet once a week. It's more than that, right? It has to be an open and honest dialogue. It has to be what can we achieve together. It has to be honesty and solution-based, right? And people above and below us in the hierarchy have to be willing to help us affect that change. And if there is that structure in any sort of institution, then I think pushing forward in that capacity is going to be able to happen. And I think that is what would make URI and GSO together true groundbreakers and trendsetters as far as mentorship and actually walking the walk instead of talking the talk as far as social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, underrepresented groups, etc.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And just a reminder that if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A chat box. So you were a research intern at the New England Aquarium as an undergrad at Boston College. Why are experiential opportunities, like URI stresses so much, so important to aspiring scientists?
It's a great question. It gives you the hands-on experience that you cannot get from a book, right? So I had never been in a research lab before, except for the ones that come with your classes as an undergrad, right? And that was very different than going and participating in the Edgerton Research Laboratory at the New England Aquarium, right? I was hired as an intern by a postdoc there, and she explained the connection of the laboratory work that you're doing and the science question in the grant that she was funded on that she was trying to answer. And all of a sudden, it allowed you to put all those pieces together of the lab work you were doing, the analysis of that information, and actually trying to address a big picture science question that meant something in basic research, applied research, or even management. And so I would strongly encourage everybody, reach out to as many opportunities as you can. As a NASA employee, I used to take as many high school and college interns as I could every year. I wish I could have taken double what I took. I was so eager to give those people positive experiences and expose them to the fields that they wanted to think about. And even if you don't know what you want to do, I would still encourage you to go down that pathway, because it really helps you identify not only what you might want to do, but more importantly, what you might not be interested in. And that's equally important.
And you were joining GSO at such an exciting time in history, with so many plans underway to revitalize the Bay campus, including the new Ocean Technology Center, a new larger pier to accommodate the new research vessel that's coming in 2023. So why is philanthropic support so important to these plans?
Oh, it's a good question. So I'm sort of new to that aspect of philanthropy. I would say a couple of things. First of all, coming from the federal government and now being in academia, there are different areas where we can make investments and we can forward objectives, and in this case, scientific ones with GSO, right? And so philanthropy allows people donors, prospects to come in and say, wow, you know, I'm really interested in climate change, and GSO is so at the forefront of climate change. Is there an initiative that we can work on together that could really forward, you know, the objectives I want to accomplish as a philanthropist and what GSO is really interested in? Whether that becomes in the form of technology, a facility, a research investment, etc. You know, that is something that I think faculty, students, and staff can get behind together. At the same time, I think that it also connects URI and GSO in general with the larger public that's out there, right? Because philanthropy, it doesn't necessarily mean we get huge donations. I want everybody in Rhode Island to feel some ownership of the Bay campus. The Narragansett Bay is your backyard and the Bay campus is your classroom, so to speak, right? And so making that connection for people at all levels, I think is very important.
And beyond GSO, why do you think it's so important that people donate to ocean education and research?
The ocean is definitely one part of our home planet that connects us all. It covers 71% of Earth's surface. If you integrate vertically, it's something like 97% of Earth's habitable space. It is absolutely vast. It supports trillions of dollars of economy worldwide. Something like 40% of humans live within 10 or 20 kilometers of the coast. I read in a UN report once. I mean, it's just people are driven by the recreation, the economics, the beauty of our oceans. The one strange thing about it is, you know, a normal human cannot see below the surface, right? And so there is this sort of out of sight, out of mind aspect to oceans. It is also a large unknown, and I think what pushes us to explore our oceans itself. So there's a lot of connection there, I think, for humans, and people are very curious about what's underneath the ocean surface.
And how do you think we can make just like ocean science in general more accessible to women, both in their interest in getting involved or in their philanthropic giving?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. I think that people have to be able to see themselves in the role that they want to achieve, right? And I think if we make the commitment as a university or even nationwide to encourage STEM, that's great that we recruit those people and the women into STEM fields, but then we actually have to create those opportunities for them as well. And then once those opportunities are created, whether they're faculty positions, student positions, jobs, we have to make sure we actually have the pathway set up to retain them, right? People's needs are changing. Like, who could have predicted a year ago that this is where we were going to be with a global pandemic, right? All the travel that we do, all seeing our families all over the world, like everything just changed. And immediately, you know, we probably all went the first 3 months without even really seeing another human being in person or having a conversation. And so when things like that happen, I think we have to be prepared for situations, or at least be flexible to accommodate situations for women in particular who may be primary caregivers to actually continue in that role and do their jobs. So in some ways, I think this global pandemic has allowed the world to prepare for what may be a wave of the future. And I think what else is really interesting, not necessarily unique to women, is actually thinking about, you know, what we can keep in place. Like if more women have found it easier to homeschool, to stay at home and care for others, to work from home, and to have a fulfilling life at home, and also have a satisfactory career, what would stop them from being a little bit more on the telework and a little bit less on the in-person? So if people are finding that advantageous, you know, what would really stop us from thinking about a policy where that could be somewhat permanent? And I know when I was home with a young son, I would have given anything for a lot more interaction with my colleagues at work while my son napped, right? And there was no connectivity back then for that kind of thing. And so we may be ushering in a whole new world of opportunity with lessons learned from the last 6 months.
And what an amazing thing to look forward to. With climate change, rising sea levels, and other stressors like plastic pollution, what are 3 critical steps you think we should take right now to preserve our oceans and waterways?
So I loved this question when you guys brought this up ahead of time, because I immediately started debating this with my husband, right? And I was like, well, my response to this would be, people need to think about farm to table and eating locally, whether they can green their commute, right? And, take public transportation, bike to work, that kind of thing. And my husband gave me this biggest eye roll on the face of the planet. And he was like, seriously? And I was like, yeah, and he used to work for the Obama White House in the Council on Environmental Quality. And I said, well, okay, big shot White House guy, what do you think is the big answer? And he's like, we need systemic change in policy, like across the board. And, and we went into this whole debate last night. So after thinking about this with Mr. Bigwig, who thinks, systemic policy is the only way to make a change, I would say 2 things. Number 1 is vote, right? The best way to voice how you feel is to vote. And I don't mean just for president, right? When bonds come up, when things like that. The other thing is, if you feel strongly about something, then pen to paper, email, write your senators and congressmen and your local representatives, because I have this great story I always tell where my husband's first job on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, was for an appropriations subcommittee. And he was the low man on the totem pole, and his job was to read all the letters that came in from all the constituents. And if there were enough on a topic, he would encapsulate them and write a 1-page brief for the chief of staff, and the chief of staff would send somebody to look into it. And so it was the moment 20 years ago where I was like, well, somebody really does read all those letters, that made you feel good about actually doing that. But on a more local scale, I would say simple things like we plug in our phone every day, right, to charge it. And if you leave that charger plugged in, it's drawing electricity. It's the same for, ask yourself, do I really need to eat watermelon in the middle of December, and the energy that has to be expended to get that watermelon in your supermarket? And in fisheries, the same thing. My family is Italian, and at Christmas, we do the 7 fishes for Christmas Eve. And I remember one Christmas Eve walking into a supermarket and seeing more seafood in the room than anybody could ever possibly eat if every person who walked through that door bought 10 pounds of it, right? And I thought, God, do we really need to do this on this scale anymore? What's the impact on the ocean for something like this? And so just those small changes in your day-to-day, thinking about green technologies at home and whether you should put solar panels on your roof, and there are tax breaks for all sorts of things like this, can really have a long-range impact on our climate.
And before we ask the last question, I would just like to remind the audience, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. So despite these challenges of the pandemic, of climate change, et cetera, what are you most optimistic for in the future?
I think with a variable and changing climate, even then comes opportunity, right? Opportunity to take all the information that we have on climate variability and change on our oceans, on our Earth system, and present that. And it allows us to explore. One of the things that I think is the most unsexy thing to sell on the face of the planet is telling people that you want to do time series work in science. That means taking information about something repeatedly over time. And people say, oh God, they're going out and they're doing the same thing. Well, think about it in the context of exploring in the temporal dimension, right? That becomes really important in taking the pulse of our home planet. And so I'm really hopeful that there will be whole new avenues of ocean exploration, but more importantly, that we'll be able to connect our discoveries and our research into packaging it for management and decision-making and policy, and having people understand the economics of something like climate change. And also, if a climate skeptic or climate denier, this is information that's based on real scientific data, okay? The climate is changing, the climate is varying, but that should also bring opportunity for investments in new technology, new engineering, and a whole lot of new investment in STEM fields. So that's like a whole new era that we're looking towards for our Earth system and making sure that we have sustainable resources for everyone.
Awesome. And so this has been such an amazing and impactful conversation. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to take some questions. Sarah, do you want to read some of the questions?
Absolutely. And we're lucky because we actually have way more than 10 minutes left. So I'm excited for that.
Sorry, we're fast talkers.
That's okay. I mean, I think it's great to have the audience interaction and be able to include the, as many questions as we can. So no problem. We do have, so we have a number of questions. So as Dean of GSO, what are your top 3 priorities to address kind of as soon as possible?
Oh, okay. So great question. So, and I'm not sure of scope or scale that this person is asking. So one of them was renaming the ship, which is underway. So there is a long historical oceanographic tradition to sort of name ships after, European explorers and otherwise, at least there has been. And so, there is a link between ocean exploration and colonialism, exploitation, and lots of other things as well as discovery. And so we opened a new competition on October 15th to rename the ship. And that is open to everyone nationwide. There's a website on the GSO webpage, and you can submit a new name and a short explanation as to why you chose that name. We'll constitute a naming committee and we'll choose a new name for this ship come the new year. So I'm really excited about that. The second is enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion on the campus. It seems like all of URI is really poised to be groundbreakers in that area. And so I'm excited about working with the faculty, students, and staff to sort of implement that plan or a plan for that policy integrated in with our strategic planning that will almost certainly encompass where we want to go in our research, in our technology, in our partnerships over the coming decade. One of the other things I'm super interested in, and I said this a little bit about this earlier, is that I think GSO, one of the things that's super unique about it is that it does everything from ocean exploration through discovery, basic and applied research into policy and economics. And I think that's so unique. I think one of the things they could do really well, and this is something I was interested in my time at NASA, is connecting the oceans on Earth with oceans across the solar system. We have a lot to learn from each other. Applying what we've learned in blue water and coastal water here to what we might learn on other planets. So the Narragansett Bay can also be an analog, worldwide for learning about things like estuarine management and resource management, et cetera. So there are a lot of, if you let me go, I could probably talk for a half an hour on that, but I'll stop there.
Fantastic. And that question was from President Dooley.
Oh, God.
You did great. And our next question, so from Michelle Fonts, I love that you want to be sure that there is retention strategy at GSO, especially for diverse students and hopefully faculty and staff too. What are your thoughts about how to make that happen?
It's a good question. I've only started to scratch the surface on an answer to this, but I'll tell you, and I don't mean to be crude when I say it this way, but I know what it's like to be one of 2 women at a male-dominated institution, but I have no idea what it's like to be Black in America, right? And I never will. And so for me, I think it's about having that dialogue, opening that dialogue with people who have that experience and thinking about what we can do together, right? Everybody has a voice. That voice needs to be heard. I think mentorship is going to be one really big part of that. I remember when I was a first-year faculty member, I sort of came on board and I had somebody assigned to me, and maybe I had some interactions from time to time with that person and maybe not. And there are always people who tell me, like, this was my experience, and I was told that this is just the way it's done. And I say BS. Just because that's how it used to be done, if that isn't working for retaining people, then we need to come up with a new equation that works, right? And so I think you start by having that dialogue with your students, with your junior faculty, with people who have been here a while, and say, what worked, so we can identify what doesn't, and then let's get to work on solving that problem. So I'm looking forward to having that dialogue with the GSO employees over time and soon.
Great, thank you so much. The questions are rolling in. This is so exciting.
It's like stepped in something, right?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I love it. Let's see. So what would you say are the most important qualities in women looking for leadership positions? And this was entered anonymously. I don't have a name attached to it, but
Oh, that's
great
okay.
question.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I think the first time I was ever told that I had, that I was like, oh, I'd like to be an oceanographer, and somebody professional was like, oh, you think you're ever going to make it that far? I really think you just need to ignore people like that. Don't ever let somebody like that stand in your way, because for every person you meet like that, there's going to be another person who's going to open a door for you. So just keep trying. If that's really truly your dream and you want to achieve X as a woman and it had never been done before, you'll have to do your homework and you'll have to study hard. But there are going to be other people, men and women, who I think are going to have to open that door for you, and they'll want to open that door for you. I have fed so many women up through the NASA chain. It's not even funny. I always am looking for new opportunities for women. So I think you just have to be persistent. You have to be prepared, and you have to be ready to be told no and not have that control you, right? Learn from a mistake, personal or professional. Don't dwell on it. You can't change the past, but you can learn from it and allow it to make you stronger going forward, and use that information when you're looking for the next door to open, and stick to your guns on that. Don't be afraid to speak up for yourself.
That's great insight. Thank you for that answer. Taking you back to your time at GSO, this is from James Mon. What is your fondest memory of your years when you were studying at GSO?
Oh my God, I have so many. So first I'll tell you, one of the things that really sets GSO apart is it really truly is a family. Like when you go to professional meetings, there are always like alumni receptions, and everybody wants to go to the GSO reception, right? Because that's the one where like everybody still keeps in touch. Everybody from outside of GSO wants to go to the GSO reception. Like it truly is a family. And I am still extremely close with, probably among my best friends are some of the friends that I made when I was a graduate student here. And I was here just over 4 years. I mean, they were the bridesmaids in my wedding. We still keep in touch, men and women, all sides. And so I remember Friday happy hours on the beach where, everybody would get together and have a swim and have a beer and talk about science and get to know each other. I remember the boat burning activities where, every September we get a boat and we burn it on the beach and have this big bonfire. And if you're going to defend that year, you have to jump over it, of course, after it burns down a little bit. And the great tradition was Michael Pilson, the chemical oceanography professor who still lives in Saunderstown, would always climb up on the boat while it was burning and give this speech about marine chemistry and chemical oceanography. And his wife eventually would be like, Michael, it's time to get down before the boat burns to pieces. And, I have a million memories like that of just like the family and the construct and the opportunity research wise that I will always remember and hope I can continue as dean.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we have some students on this call as well, and I'd like to address one of the questions that I think pertains to that population. This is from Sarah Meyer, or Mayer, I apologize, Sarah. If we are strongly interested in going to graduate school, what is the best way for us to go about this? Should we go to graduate school right out of getting our bachelor's in science, or should we get a job first and see if the company will pay for us to go to graduate school?
All great questions. Sounds like you're on the right path already. I was actually talking to a prospective student yesterday who was applying to graduate programs in a number of different areas because he wasn't sure what he wanted to do. And he's a really bright guy. And I said, look, graduate school is a big commitment, right? Like when you make that commitment, whether it's a thesis program or not, you will be immersed in that field. So if you're debating between like toxicology and environmental science, you'll want to think about that a little bit before you commit to one or the other, because you will be all toxicology all the time, all environmental science all the time, right? And that's, you should know what you want to do before you commit a couple of years of your life to something like that. So, you know, taking a year and working, finding a company that does something you're interested in, doing an internship, doing a gap year while you try to suss that out is not a bad idea. You know, after I came to the federal government, I learned that there are programs where they'll pay for your advanced degrees. And I know a lot of companies have that as well. So it's a smart move, you know. I think if I had my life to do over again, I might have taken the civil service test at 18 and, you know, been able to retire from the government at 48. And I say that somewhat jokingly, but, you know, you'd have to know at the age of 18 that that's what you wanted. So let me reassure you, though, that it is okay to not know what you want to do, right? And it is also okay to do something for 20 years and completely change careers and go in a different direction. I mean, I think companies these days look at that as making you well-rounded. It's very rare. When I tell people I was at NASA 18 years, they're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? You stayed there 18 years? What's that like? You know, and you know, that's not for everybody, and I don't think it's the norm anymore. So make sure, the key part is just to make sure whatever you do, you find it energizing. Because if you don't, then you probably have a sign you're not in the right path or position.
That is great feedback. Thank you. We have so many questions here. It's really amazing. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them all, so I do apologize to those who may not get their questions answered. But for our next question from Jacqueline Wing, as a scientist, do you work with or coordinate with other institutions like the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory in New York? And what are your relations like? What are your relationships like that like?
Yes, so the ocean is a vast place. There is a lot of synergistic opportunity research-wise with other institutions. In fact, URI is a member to many. There's one called the East Coast Oceanographic Consortium that was started about a year ago, and we have many partners in that as well. So there are groups that are regional and national that are made up of different oceanographic institutions that seek to collaborate on things like the ship and coordination, research, and other aspects of academics. And then there are more organic partnerships that are developed between a lot of the research that the faculty are doing or the students and staff are doing, and other institutions. And there might be large programs funded by funding agencies in Washington, D.C., for example, that involve a multitude of national institutions and partners. So there are any number of ways that collaborations can happen. I'll also point out that GSO has a number of international collaborations as well. And this is an area I very much look forward to expanding upon when we can actually travel again. From my former position, I have a lot of academic contacts all over the world, Southeast Asia to Europe, everywhere. And I look forward to pushing more of those collaborative opportunities forward for GSO, thinking about what we can do together, but also creating those opportunities for faculty, students, and staff.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I apologize, we're jumping like all over the place.
That's okay.
These questions are phenomenal. So we're just
a non-linear day. I think we're all used to it.
Okay, great. Yeah. So the next one, in relation to COVID, this is from Jennifer Prentice. Since COVID is not going away, it may require changes in leadership style And what are your thoughts on what you can do in your capacity as a leader to ensure that GSO workforce does not lose its momentum and productivity in protecting and understanding our local and global ocean and earth environment?
Just for the record, Jen Prentice is a friend of mine. Yeah, thanks, Jen. It's a really good question. I mean, I think right now, you know, being new, I came on board and it's more like, how's everyone doing? Like, is everybody okay? Do you have the equipment you need, the time you need, the support you need? One of the things that was really important to me at NASA was, you know, when we did video conferences, I started making everybody put on their camera, and it became apparent, like, there were some people, you know, like the people with families who are caring for others, you know, were like just trying to juggle so many things, but they were like, the people who are home alone or who are single are not having any easier a time because they're so isolated. So to me, it was like first order, just making sure everybody's mental and physical health is okay. Then I think the funding agencies and the university has been very good about making sure, like, if you miss a deadline, if you're behind on something, if research can't continue, that they're creating the environment for you to ask for more money, an augmentation, an extension on a deadline. The Office of Management and Budget has been helping with that. And the university has too. Like, if people cannot make deadlines on certain things, you know, it's fair to say, when can you make it, right? And create a little bit of flexibility in the system, because this is just unprecedented. In the long term, behind the scenes, you know, I've been coming in almost every day, trying to be COVID safe, trying to come up to speed on all the new initiatives and opportunities, because things in the federal government and in the state are sort of plowing ahead, ready or not. While there's some flexibility, as I said, on deadlines, I think we have to continue to work towards some of the objectives we want to achieve scientifically, with plans, with progress reports, with proposals. You know, that hasn't ceased at all. And I applaud the university for making the opportunity to continue that work seamless, so to speak, even at a time like this. So people are still coming into the labs and working. The authorizing officials and support staff are all in continually as SRGAs, working on meeting our deadlines for researchers. So that all seems to be going okay at the moment, but I think it's something we constantly have to keep our eye on.
Sure, and thank you for that response. They keep coming in here. So this is from Catalina Martinez. What do you think some of your greatest challenges and barriers may be to achieve your goal number 2, which, just going back to the beginning of the program, was enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion at GSO, and how can we, the broader GSO community, help you and support you?
Oh, I appreciate that question. I don't know. I think the first thing is to make sure everybody knows this is an open dialogue. We have to identify and listen to each other, and then we have to bring in people who have experience in this area to work with us in a collaborative sense, and not in the I just want to hear you talk, and not in the what can you do for me sense, right? This has to be a cultural shift, to make a broad cultural change. And so I've started to have those dialogues with the talented staff on the main campus and around me and otherwise. I applaud the GSO students for writing a letter my first week that they gave to me. In fact, they're my meeting this afternoon to sort of talk about opportunities that they see for affecting some change at GSO. Because, I mean, as I said, I don't know what it's like to be Black in America, to be an underrepresented group at an institution like URI or nationwide. And so I look forward to opening that dialogue and making diversity, equity, and inclusion, and planning for it a true integrated objective in GSO's strategic plan moving forward. The last thing I'll tell you is it seemed pretty obvious to me that there were some very small changes we could make within the way we recruit students and potentially the way that we retain them, which means like calling for cohort opportunities for underrepresented groups and graduate students and bringing them in 2 or 3 maybe at a time that might help them find internal support. And the same goes for faculty and thinking about cohort hires as a strategy for recruitment, and retention will take some work, I think.
Thank you again so much for that answer. So shifting gears a little bit, from Dee Dee Chatham, is there a plan to grow ocean-related startup companies based on GSO research?
I am so glad you asked that question. Yeah, one of the things I'm really interested in doing is making sure people in the state of Rhode Island recognize the research that is done by GSO, not just in Rhode Island, but internationally, that has relevance to the state of Rhode Island. And the reason that's so important to me is that, you know, Rhode Island is the ocean state, right? You have a robust blue economy. And one of the things I'd like to do is think about ways that we can work with local people and businesses and make that more robust. I'm not sure the local businesses know the breadth of what we do at GSO, and with some of the partnerships among some of the other colleges in cells, pharmacy, engineering, and otherwise, there's plenty of opportunity. And so, you know, over the next year, I've half joked, but I'm actually really serious about how I'd like to find a way to create sort of this traveling roadshow for GSO and go out and have these dialogues with a lot of the local businesses and a lot of the local schools and centers to show people what we do and talk about collaborative opportunity there. So yes, I would very much like to see that happen moving forward, and I'm open to ideas of how to do that better.
Very cool. We still have a few minutes left and we still have some questions, so we'll just keep on going here. This is from Sonia Refugio Coronado. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Sonia. Have you planned to collaborate with other programs at URI to develop multidisciplinary studies?
Great question. So yes, 2 things. I think one of the things GSO faculty, students, and staff have brought forward is an examination of our existing academic structure and a lot of our research to see whether we should be thinking about a little bit more interdisciplinary research than perhaps we've done so far. I'm not saying that we're not doing enough. It's just an interest in looking a little bit further at that. And I've also been chatting with a lot of the deans in the other colleges about collaborative opportunities. I saw John Kirby yesterday from CELS, Ray Wright from engineering last week. I chatted this morning with Jen Riley in arts and sciences. I've met with Molly from the business school. And we've had these long talks about like opportunity for new programs, revamping programs, interdisciplinary opportunities. Are we actually creating academic programs and research that answer what the student body is looking for moving forward so we can prepare them for their jobs? And the woman prior who asked about, ocean businesses, I'd love to hear from them what they're looking for in hires so we can work with the other schools to actually prepare our students for that. That's really important. It's a good question.
Fantastic. Sounds like you've been busy for sure.
I'm new.
Yeah. Another question, again from an anonymous attendee. What opportunities exist for GSO to help communities, both in Rhode Island and globally, be better stewards of their coastal places?
Great question. So one of the things I'd like to do beginning in FY22 is think about money that GSO has in areas like coastal resilience, and whether we couldn't direct those funds for underrepresented underrepresented groups from Rhode Island to come into GSO as graduate students and work within the GSO framework to further coastal resilience or something near and dear to their heart, right? Whatever thematic area relative to Narragansett Bay or the state of Rhode Island is important. I'd love to have the opportunity to be trained in that area and then work with them to be placed somewhere where they can actually do work that they find energizing and beneficial to something that's important to them in the state. I think also a lot of the work that's done at the Coastal Resources Center and through a lot of our GSO faculty is also very important. It's got international collaborations. For example, last October, I made a pretty extensive visit through Southeast Asia through the Mekong River Delta for my old position at NASA. And what became really obvious is that some of the strategies and approaches that we use to manage big watersheds in the United States of America are different than how they're managing Mekong River Delta resources. And I think CRC does a lot of this type of thing internationally, right? Where it's not like, what can we do for them and what can they do for us, but what is it that we can learn and establish together that moves the whole field forward and allows people interested in things like coastal resilience, sustainable resources, and other sustainable development goals, say of the UN, to actually be implemented. And so I think GSO is uniquely positioned to educate students accordingly so they're prepared to go out and achieve those things that they want to related to those topics.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. The last one here from Michelle, do you have a mechanism for connecting with students at GSO to make sure that they are heard?
Yes, a mechanism. I think at this day and age, I think there's any number of ways we can communicate with each other, right? The students, I give them a lot of credit. They came right in my first week, dropped this 16-page letter on my desk, and you know, they had thought about it. It's very clear there are any number of topics that they gave an incredible amount of thought to. And I said, I'd love to talk to you guys about this. I want to listen. I want to hear more about what you want. People have come in individually. People have emailed me. I've seen things on Twitter and Instagram that people are interested in. I've reached out to them because of it. You know, I think there are any number of ways to communicate. And while, you know, dramatic changes are going to require some time, some collaboration, and some effort, I want to make sure that all the students feel like, you know, my door is open and they're welcome to come here, and not because I just want to hear them out, but because, you know, if they raise an issue that really does require change and would be really good for GSO overall, I want them to be part of the solution there as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So yeah, I think that was our last question, just given where we at with time. I do apologize to those that asked questions that we just didn't have a chance to get to. But thank you all for your participation. And Dean Bontempi, it has just been so nice getting to know you better. And it's just such a nice conversation between you and Theresa. And I really enjoyed learning about you and of course your background, which we already knew was impressive, but hearing you speak about it more is really amazing. So special thanks to Theresa Brown today for serving as our host. And to those of you that joined us today for this webinar, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do so. And please keep an eye out for future programs in our new Women in Leadership Speaker Series. As mentioned, this program has been recorded, so we will be putting it out and I'll be sending it out to our attendees and it'll be available on our website as well in the coming days. You will receive a brief survey about this program and an email message from me with the recording. And if you're interested, a link to give to our Women Transforming Women Endowed Scholarship. So would appreciate it if you completed that survey and shared your thoughts on today's program so that we can bring you more in this Women in Leadership Speaker Series. So thanks again to everybody for joining and have a really wonderful day.
Thanks for having me, and thank you, Theresa.
Thank you.
Thank you.